What's up YouTube, it's your boy JP's on the keys, and it's too easy to wrap this video today, and we have Napoleon's Bloodiest Day, Borodino 1812. Without further ado, let's hop into it.
History TV video is brought to you by...
And I also heard that, I think somebody commented that Epic History TV is dropping another video on Napoleon on Friday. What I'm gonna do, it's on 1814. So most of the videos go up to like 1813. I'm gonna do all the videos there, and then I'm going to do the 1814. Then there was an 1815. I'm gonna do that last, just to keep in chronological order, just to be organized. You know what I mean? So just letting you know. So if I don't react to that video immediately, that's why.
Magellan TV, the documentary streaming service. Russia, 1812.
First of all, I'm not gonna lie. This beat kind of catchy. I know this has nothing to do with that beat kind of catchy. I can't lie. I know this has nothing to do with the topic, but the beat was catchy. That's all I gotta say.
Napoleon invades his former ally with the largest army Europe has ever seen. But for the French Emperor, the decisive blow remains frustratingly beyond reach. Russia's resilience is unlike anything he's ever encountered. And as winter closes in, his army begins the most infamous retreat in history.
Part 2.
September 1812. 10 weeks had passed since Napoleon invaded Russia with more than 500,000 men.
First, wasn't Britain in the war around this time? Wasn't Britain in the War of 1812 around this time? I'm pretty sure it was. Of course, duh, because it's 1812. But I knew Britain was in the war at this time as well. So that's crazy how Britain was already helping Spain, and then all of a sudden they got involved in their own war. So it's just a lot of war around this time, definitely, you know. But I mean, it's always been a lot of war. Like every century, it's always been a couple of big wars.
The French Emperor wanted a quick victory over the Russians, one that would force Emperor Alexander to make peace and agree to French terms. But at Vitebsk and then Smolensk, the outnumbered Russian army had narrowly escaped his clutches. The holy city of Smolensk had been virtually destroyed. Napoleon had advanced deep into Russia, and months of marching had left his army decimated by disease and exhaustion. It was now half its original strength, and summer was nearly over. But finally, 70 miles west of Moscow, near the village of Borodino, the Russians had turned to offer battle. Napoleon would have a chance to win the decisive victory that he believed would end the war. The Russian army, commanded by the 67-year-old one-eyed veteran General Kutuzov, occupied a defensive position across the two main roads leading from Smolensk to Moscow. General Barclay de Tolly's First Army was on the right, its front protected by the Kalatsha River, steep-banked but shallow and easily forded. Prince Bagration's Second Army was on the left, a more open position but reinforced by major earthworks.
Yo, my man got the crazy sideburns. Like my man got the sideburns down to the chin almost. I see with them sideburns. He snapped with the sideburns though.
Great Redoubt, and what the French nicknamed for their shape, the flèche, the arrows. Another forward redoubt at Borodino was expected to delay the enemy's advance. Historians still dispute the size of the Russian army, but it's likely Kutuzov had around 121,000 men and 680 guns at Borodino. On the 5th of September, Napoleon's army began to arrive from the west. Around 130,000 men and 585 guns. Napoleon quickly saw that the Borodino redoubt would have to be taken before he could deploy his army, and ordered an immediate assault. The attack was led by Compan's 5th Division of the 1st Corps, supported by the Polish 5th Corps to the south. In several hours of heavy fighting, the redoubt changed hands more than once. But late that evening, the Russians finally withdrew to their main line, and the redoubt fell to the French. Its capture had cost them an estimated 4,000 casualties, while the Russians lost around 6,000 men.
So, what I'm seeing is Russia is, they're saying like, oh, we're okay, we're losing, okay, we might hold up, we might put up a little defense here, but if we lose this section, we're not really worried, because then we have our main fleet waiting. You know what I'm saying? This is just a way to pick off as many troops, to thin out the army, thin out the main army as much as they can, so that when the two big armies meet, it might be a chance to outnumber, a chance for like outnumbering. So like these little skirmishes are just here to kind of shave off the French supply, like shave off the French numbers. So when it's time to get to the main battle, it's a certain amount of the certain armies have done their job to get rid of. Let's say they got rid of like 6,000, so now you got 6,000 less men you gotta deal with when you get to the main battle. I know I probably repeat the same thing maybe like 3 times, but just bear with me, okay? I'm sorry.
Napoleon noted how few prisoners were taken, a worrying sign of the enemy's unbroken resolve. Both sides spent the next day preparing for battle.
See, like I said, the main line, everybody's there, so you have an advantage.
Marshal Davout, commanding French 1st Corps and widely considered Napoleon's most able subordinate, appealed to the Emperor to use his corps to make a wide, outflanking attack to the south. But Napoleon dismissed the idea as too risky, and instead began preparing for a massive frontal assault on the Russian defenses.
I figure it makes sense if you attack, if something huge and destructive. Obviously, if you're attacking a force that's dug in and has trenches and it's fortified and ready for you, you know what I'm saying? Obviously, you're not going to be at the advantage.
Shortly after dawn on the 7th of September, Orthodox priests paraded one of Russia's holiest icons, Our Lady of Smolensk, before the Russian army. It was a stirring sight for many devout Russian soldiers, thousands of whom would not live to see dusk. The battle began at 6 a.m. as French batteries opened a deafening cannonade against the Russian defenses. Eugene's 4th Corps advanced on Borodino village, lightly held by Jaegers of the Russian Imperial Guard. After clearing the village, his infantry crossed the Kalacha and advanced towards the Great Redoubt, but were driven back with heavy losses. The Russians burned the bridge across the river, but did not launch a counterattack, and Eugene was able to move cannon into the village to put flanking fire on the Great Redoubt. In the center, Davout's 1st Corps began its advance against the Fleches, coming under heavy fire. While on the right, the Polish 5th Corps, ordered to take Utitsa, got held up in the woods and ravines. Their slow advance allowed Tushkov's 3rd Corps to send a division north to reinforce the Fleche defences. Kutuzov, at his headquarters in Gorky, took little part in the battle, leaving tactical decisions to his subordinates. Barclay and Bagration had spent most of the summer arguing furiously over strategy, but in the hour of crisis, they put their differences aside. They could see the main French attack was falling on the Russian center and left. So Barclay ordered General Bagavout's 2nd Corps south to reinforce Bagration. Fighting around the Fleche intensified as the French captured one of the earthworks, only to be driven out by a Russian counterattack. Davout himself was injured in the fighting as he fell from his dying horse, but he refused to leave the field. When Russian cavalry counterattacked, Marshal Murat himself led the French cavalry forward to meet them. Ney's 3rd Corps now joined the attack on the Fleche. A charge by Russian cuirassiers forced Murat to take shelter in a square of Württemberg infantry. Murat, with his flamboyant dress and reckless courage, had now even made a name for himself among the Russians. The Cossacks in particular saw him as a kindred spirit and were eager to capture him alive if they could. To the south, Polish troops now took Utitsa, which the Russians set ablaze before withdrawing. But General Bagavout's reinforcements arrived just in time to shore up the Russian flank. Around 10 a.m., Eugène launched another attack on the Great Redoubt. It was briefly captured by Morand's 1st Division, before his men were thrown out by a ferocious Russian counterattack.
I like how the Russians are definitely guarding the trenches well, and you know what I'm saying? They're definitely making sure that even though the French might take one, hey, you know what I'm saying? Hey, y'all gotta get out. You know, y'all gotta get out now. Y'all had your fun. You gotta get out. Like they're kicking them out swiftly, without them pushing further into the main line. Like I like how they're defending the trenches in this part.
The Russian army's 27-year-old artillery commander, General Kutuzov, was killed leading one of these counterattacks. A heroic death, but a blow to the organization of Russian artillery for the rest of the day. Fighting continued to rage around the Fleche earthworks. Some counted as many as 6 major French assaults, involving 45,000 troops, with hundreds of cannon on both sides, pouring fire into the packed ranks. More than once, French infantry fought their way into one of the Russian positions, only to be driven out again at bayonet point. Junot's Westphalian Corps was sent forward in support, helping to clear Russian skirmishers from the woods to the south. General Bagration was close to the action, overseeing the defense of the Fleche, leading forward reinforcements and ordering counterattacks. Around 10 a.m., he was hit in the leg by shell fragments.
Ooh.
Mortally wounded, he was carried from the field. Shaken by the loss of their iconic commander, the exhausted Russian infantry began to fall back. The French finally took the Fleche.
So he died from a shot in the leg. I can understand, because like now you get shot in the leg, like you can definitely survive. Maybe if it depends on if it severs an artery. If it severs like, let's say if it severs like the femoral artery, and like that's so much bleeding. Like it depends on where you get hit though, because if you get hit like right in your quad, like where the femur is at, there's a big artery, and if it gets hit, like the amount of bleeding that could probably come would probably kill you. Like you would probably die. You would probably bleed out at that point. But That's the only thing. That's the only way I feel like you could get shot from the leg and it'd be fatal. Maybe you could be paralyzed, or like you wouldn't be able to walk. Maybe your kneecap would explode, or you get hit and the bone breaks. But other than
Marshal Murat then led forward Friant's division, First Corps' last reserve, supported by waves of heavy cavalry on both flanks. Russian grenadiers formed squares to ward off the French cuirassiers, while their own guard cavalry fought the French in a giant confused melee, with heavy losses on both sides. The Russians resisted doggedly, but the combined onslaught of French artillery, cavalry, and infantry proved irresistible. As the Russians pulled back, Friant's infantry fought their way into the village of Semyonovskaya. The Russian center was in disarray and seemed close to breaking. Surely now was the time for Napoleon to deliver the knockout blow.
soldiers facing the enemy, let's go and get killed. Oh wow. Like, imagine hearing that as a young private in the army. Imagine hearing that.
For most of the day, Napoleon remained at his headquarters near Borodino. Those around him later said that illness, as well as the exertions of the long campaign, had left him tired and irritable. As the Russian center buckled, Murat and his staff urged him to send forward his last reserve, the Imperial Guard.
I'm going to say, when was he going to bring I was wondering when he was going to bring the reserve in, because he just had the reserve just hiding back there in the woods. Like, bring them up. Add some reinforcements, you know what I'm saying?
The Emperor refused. If there is another battle tomorrow, he asked them, where is my army? But he did make one exception. Barclay was continuing to move troops from his unengaged right wing to bolster the center. As Osterman Tolstoy's 4th Corps arrived behind the Russian center, French observers feared they were massing for an attack. So Napoleon ordered forward General Sorbier's Guard artillery. His batteries opened a devastating fire on the enemy. Yet even as they were mown down in their ranks, the Russian infantry stood their ground. On the Russian right wing, all remained quiet, so General Platov, commander of the Don Cossacks, proposed that he lead an attack on the lightly defended Borodino village. Permission received, Generals Platov and Uvarov led a force of 8,000 Cossacks and cavalry across the Kalacha River.
Flank, bro, smart.
They fell on French and Italian troops around Borodino with complete surprise, spreading panic and disorder. Grouchy's 3rd Cavalry Corps had to be pulled back across the river to drive off the Russians. Russian commanders saw this raid as a missed opportunity, but it had delayed the next French attack by 2 hours, and may have persuaded Napoleon that he was right to hold back his reserve.
I have never seen such carnage. Wounded for the 22nd time. Wounded for the 22nd time. So, either you hit by a bullet, you get shrapnel, you get hit by shrapnel, maybe an explode. You wounded for the 22nd. Bro.
Around 3 p.m., the French launched their biggest assault yet on the Great Redoubt. Russian gunners targeted the French infantry advancing to their front, allowing French cavalry to outflank the redoubt and charge it from the rear. Saxon cavalry were first in, cutting down Russian infantry and gunners almost to the last man. It was an astonishing feat by the horsemen against all the rules of war, and testament to the ferocity of the fighting. As Eugene's infantry consolidated their hold on the redoubt, he ordered forward all the available cavalry to exploit this success.
There we go.
But they were met and checked by the last Russian cavalry reserves. Eugene now implored Napoleon to commit the Imperial Guard. But again, the Emperor refused. "I will not destroy my guard," he told his staff. "I am 800 leagues from France, and I will not risk my last reserve."
Smart man.
By 5 p.m., both armies were in a state of utter exhaustion. The battlefield was strewn with dead and wounded. Some infantry battalions could muster only a third of their strength. Cavalry could advance no faster than a trot. Gun crews were collapsing with fatigue. As dusk approached, fighting slowly died out across the battlefield. Napoleon and the French army expected the fighting to resume the next day. But by dawn, Kutuzov, having learned the full, horrifying scale of Russian losses, had ordered a withdrawal. The losses on both sides were enormous. Russian casualties are estimated at 44,000. French losses around 30,000, including 49 generals, 12 of them killed. Borodino would prove to be the bloodiest single day of the Napoleonic Wars. The Russian army could not fight another battle until it had received major reinforcements.
I wouldn't blame him.
And so Kutuzov decided that he must abandon Moscow. On the 15th of September, a week after his victory at Borodino, Napoleon entered the city. He would find it virtually deserted, and already the first fires starting to burn. Thank you to the artists Alexander Averyanov and Yegor Zaitsev for kind permission to use their artwork in this video. And thanks as always to all our Patreon supporters for making this series possible. Find out how you too can support the
this battle, again, this battle was a heavy loss for both sides, and Napoleon definitely probably put a very good chess move in not being able to, not wanting to bring in his reserve guard, and Napoleon had advanced the farthest into Russia, well farther than the Germans did during World War I. Because I don't think the Germans made it to Moscow. They got close to Moscow within like 100 miles or around that, but they didn't get to Moscow. So Napoleon's already been farther than the Germans. So this one Napoleon's retreat. So obviously he's going to retreat from there. But again, thank you again for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Hit that subscribe button if you are new to the channel. Also, don't forget to turn on my post notifications if you have not turned them on. Thank you again. Please have a great day. Stay on the grind. I'm out. Peace.